For many years, I actually thought that I understood what it meant to give. And then 3 years ago, something happened in my life, and one of my Akanksha children taught me what I believe it actually means to give. His name was Latif. And Latif was, I think, most of our favorite children. He was one of those kids that was just good at everything. He was good at art and science, and he sang beautifully. And he was the kind of boy that would walk into a room and just make you happy by his very presence. And then 3 years ago, he died very suddenly. I was on my way to Pune, got a call saying Latif is in ICU. I turned my car around, reached back to Bombay, and by the time I reached, he had passed away. The incredible thing is the next day I was in his little home in the slum. He didn't have a father. He lived with his mother and his grandfather. He was very, very, very fond of his grandfather. His dream had been to earn enough money so that his 75-year-old grandfather could stop working. And his grandfather told me, he said, Didi, I knew Latif was so sick. It wasn't an ordinary sickness. And so at night, I took the 14,000 rupees that I had earned over the last many months, and I put it in Latif's hand, and I said, Latif, take this money and promise me you will go to a private hospital. Don't go to a government hospital. Latif, you're not well. And Latif, without telling anybody, took that money because he didn't want his grandfather to go back to work, put the money back into the trunk, went to a government hospital, and died 12 hours later. This was very, very humbling to me. I don't know if the outcome would have been different, but what I do know is that I began to think about the complexity of giving at a whole new level. So I wanted to start with that. Do I have the slides? Great. I just realized how nervous I was, one, following all these speakers, but then two, I hadn't checked whether the slides were here. So I really have the immense privilege of taking you for the next few minutes into my world, which I love so much. And when people ask me, why do you do what you do? I turn around and I say, why do you do what you do? Because I love what I do so much. But what I'm trying to do, and what Teach for India and Akanksha is trying to do, is to really build the movement to end educational inequity. So when I was asked to talk about impact today, I was very excited because the reason I took a step to leave something that I had built over 17 years to move into a new initiative called Teach for India, I moved because I believed that this model can truly impact India and make it better for all children. I really believe that. I think it's going to depend on how well we do it. I think it's going to depend on our grit and our staying power, but I think it has the ability to change India. Can I go to the next slide? You can just go down. Thanks. These statistics are not new, but I keep seeing them, and every time I see them, I feel sick. 94% of our kids don't complete school. The way I read that statistic is that 94% of India's potential is not maximized. That's the challenge. At the same time, it's a massive opportunity. If you look at where India is today, and you think if we were able to maximize that 94%, where could India really be? Next slide, please. What excites me is the way that we're addressing the problem. So we think that the problem is actually a leadership problem. That to solve any of these massive social issues in the country, you need not 1 and 5 and 100, but thousands and thousands of your best and brightest and most committed young people obsessed by that vision to solve the problem. Who are these people? I'm just going to introduce you to a few. This is Ankur. He graduated from Northwestern University in Chicago, Indian American, never lived in India, came back to India saying, I want to do something to end educational inequity. He's teaching this year, just joined a couple of months ago, teaching in Pune. Next slide, please. Shashank, very different profile, worked with the Indian Air Force. After that, worked with Infosys, had 8 years of work experience, said, I want to leave that. I want to end educational inequity. Last year taught at Pune. This year wanted to push himself even more, said Teach for India is still not dealing with the most vulnerable child, so he's moved to Delhi and he's teaching kids on the street. Shrutika used to work with ICICI Prudential, very different world, left to join Teach for India to end educational inequity. Who are these people? Can you just click one more? What we did was we took perhaps the most crazy idea for a bright young Indian. We said we want the brightest young Indians in the country to teach full-time for 2 years in our poorest schools. So these were people that were otherwise on their way to the IIMs, on their way to be doctors, on their way abroad, and they had to go home and tell their families, after all this investment in me, I'm going to teach in class 2 government school. And we made it incredibly selective because we said teaching is unbelievably difficult. Teaching is unbelievably important. And these teachers, after 2 years, are going to be the kind of people that begin to understand how to solve the problem at a systemic level. So out of all the applications, this year we got almost 5,000 applications. We take between 7 and 10% of the people that apply to the program. What is the program? I think this is important when we think about impact. So we start with a bucket that we call Transform Self. And we tell our fellows that use the 2 years to become the strongest, most sensitive, most determined leader that you can possibly be. Stop asking what other people can do to solve the problem and ask yourself one question. Ask yourself, what will I do about it? Transform class. We say at the heart of this, the impact is in the classroom. Unless you know what it takes, and all of you with children know what I'm talking about with my own 2 daughters, the number of experiences, the amount of exposure it takes to maximize our own children's potential. How do you do that with 40 kids, with 60 kids in your class? So keeping the transformation of the child at the center of this. And then we tell these young fellows that go in, it's not just about your classrooms. How do you begin to influence the teacher next door to bring about change? How do you influence the HM of the school to start to have a vision for that school? How do you take transformation beyond? And finally, we say, how do you transform the country? It's not a 2-year fellowship program. You're a leader for life in this thing. So the impact on the fellow becomes very critical to us. You can just go forward. Thanks. So just to show you a quick example of impact, and we measure impact in many different ways. I'm going to talk about a few of them. This is a little boy, Sohail, in Manu's class. Beginning of last year, on the left is his writing sample. You can see his writing sample. Same kid, exactly 1 year later, was asked to write. Huge difference in the writing ability. But even more important, look at his choice of what he's written about. So on the left, he's talking about a cat and a rad, because that's pretty much all that he knows. On the right, he's talking about the day I will become a superhero. Everything's changed. His aspirations have changed. His understanding of achievement has changed. He's on his path to have the same kind of choices as any child. Next slide, please. You don't have to read this. Let me just talk to you about it. So what we say is when we go into our classrooms, our fellows are faced with 40 to 60 kids, 4 to 6 years behind where they are supposed to be. So these are kids in class 3, class 4. They are testing, 99% of them are testing in our baseline at a pre-K or a nursery level. That's the scale of the challenge. So what we tell our fellows is unless we're ensuring that every single child in these classrooms is making a minimum of 1.5 years of growth in 1 year, we're never going to bridge the gap. So a big piece of our impact is looking at the individual child, working with an external testing agency to say, can we test the kids at the beginning, at the middle, and at the end? The other thing is that we believe that transformational education loosely falls into 4 really big buckets. And here again, this speaks a little bit to the complexity of measuring impact and how you select what to support as a donor. So the first is academic achievement. And there I think there's been a lot of research, and even that is incredibly complicated to measure academic impact in these multi-grade classrooms accurately. The second bucket is we all understand that for kids to get where they need to, there's the bucket of values and mindsets, right? How do they inculcate and understand what their value system is and what the mindsets are that are going to get them to be effective? So little changes. In Akanksha, the girl whose elder sister got married at 12 and 13, and Naida today is 23, and she's still not married, and she's standing up and telling her family, I'm not going to get married until I'm ready. You know? Or the boy who was experiencing sexual abuse in his house for many years, was too scared, didn't know what to do about it, who today is standing up and saying, it's not acceptable, and I can fix this problem. I can change it, right? So there's the complexity of measuring impact around values and mindsets. Then there's the complexity of measuring the change in aspirations. So our fellows come in and they ask the kids, what do you want to be? And every kid says doctor. And then you say, like, so what is it going to take to be a doctor? Why do you want to be a doctor? Nobody can answer, right? How do you get kids from there to a real understanding of, here are my strengths, here are my development areas, here are my dreams, here's my family reality. How do I put all this together and craft a plan to get there? And how do you measure that change? How do you measure the kid who had no idea of where he wanted to be, who today is on that path to be where he wants to be? So this is all the complexity of things that we're grappling with right now in the area of impact. Next slide, please. Finally, it's just so hard because our classrooms are so hard. And I want to just tell you one story from last week. We launched in Delhi a month ago. Our fellows have completed 4 weeks of teaching in Delhi. And Delhi Government School, I went to visit in South Delhi, Sangam Vihar. Firstly, the rickshaw doesn't even take you to that school because there's a rumor that that community is too dangerous, so you can't even get there. So you need to get somewhere far and walk to get there. 500 girls in the morning shift, 500 boys in the afternoon shift. We were there in the morning shift. I have 2 fellows in that school. There were 5 male teachers with these 500 girls. No women, because a child was raped 2 years ago, thrown into the forest, so no woman will go there. No HM, because nobody wants to be in the school. No running water, no electricity, no furniture, no instruction. When I say no instruction, the teachers are not in the class. The 5 male teachers sit in the playground on plastic chairs, drink tea, and don't step into class. My city rector saw those 2 fellows, and in the first week she said, oh, we have to pull you out. You can't have impact in an environment like this. And they said, no. We're here. We need to be here. We need to find a way to have impact. So I think that's the complexity of what we're trying to fix, even in our urban centers, even if in the richer parts of our urban cities. Next slide, please. Finally, I just want to tell you what I think is the power of this model, and actually goes beyond the 2-year fellowship. And I want to give you a few examples. So at the end of 2 years, fellows graduate. We had our first batch, very new program. We're in year 3. First batch graduated a few months ago. Let's meet some of them. Next slide. Oh, sorry, can you go on? Sorry, go on. Yeah. This is Sana. Sana worked with GE before the fellowship. She came in, worked for 2 years in a municipal school in Mumbai, and today she's with McKinsey, only looking at their school transformation project. Next slide. This is Prabhu. Prabhu grew up in a village school, went to a government school, had a terrible education, somehow got to college, did 2 years of the fellowship. Today, he's the Maharashtra director for Room to Read. He's putting libraries into 75 municipal schools that don't have a single book right now. This is Gaurav. Gaurav left the fellowship with a dream of setting up 100 of the most outstanding schools for the poorest kids, government schools. He's right now in probably the leading school leadership program in the world, which is called the KIPP Fellowship in New York. He's going to be there this year. He's going to open his first school in June. This is Tarun. Tarun has a dream of opening an Indian school of politics. He wants young people to be given the moral fiber to deal with active politics. He's on a Fulbright at the Kennedy School of Government. He's going to be there this year, come back to India next year to do this. This is Anna, who's one of many people, Venal, I'm going to hand over to in 1 second, who have stayed with Teach for India, saying, we want to grow in such a rapid way because we know every single one of these leaders is so incredibly important that they've stayed with the movement to support new fellows coming into the movement. I'm just going to stop there, actually, and say that this is a global fight, which makes it even bigger and even more scalable. There are now 19 countries around the world that are doing similar models, inspired by the first country, Teach for America, which started 20 years ago. And I'm going to hand over to Venal, because when I thought about impact in Teach for India, it speaks most clearly when our fellows speak. So Venal just graduated. She was from our inaugural cohort of Teach for India.
I'm going to keep it pretty simple and stick to the structure that Shaheen walked you through about transforming self, class, school, and country. So first, I want to talk about transforming self and how I have changed. I'm not a very, very ambitious person. My goal has always been pretty simple. I just want to be happy. But what has changed is what is giving me happiness. As when I was growing up in school and in college, happiness for me was earning a lot of money, having a better house, keeping my parents happy. It was very me. I was like, why should I be bothered about anyone else? And what I learned, the people I spoke to was all as that, how's this going to benefit me? If it's not, I don't want to listen to it. But I've changed to now wanting to look for people, go and sit with them to learn from them, whether they're concerned with what I'm doing or not. My happiness is coming from being with other people, whether it's children, whether it's other fellows, whether it's just this crowd and learning from people. And happiness out of giving, like Shaheen said, just giving time, giving love, giving energy, and getting a lot in return. And that's how I have changed, and I think I have transformed in these 2 years. My class, transforming class. I walk in on day 1, talk to them in English. I have a lot of activities. They're in standard 3 in an English medium school. I've planned my entire day. At the end of the day, I realized like they didn't understand a word of what I said. They didn't even understand sit down. And that was a reality I wasn't prepared for. Violence breaking out, fights breaking out, every lunch break, in the middle of a class, a fight breaking out, to somewhere in my first year, somewhere in my second year, students standing up and saying, Didi, this is not respect, he is abuse. And to see that change, I can see my class transforming. Coming to transforming school, it's not just our classroom, it's not just my classroom or every fellow's classroom. Working with teachers, working with my HM in an MCGM municipal school, hearing her ideas for a school, saying that she wants to improve reading, she wants to improve speaking, and then working with her and the other teachers to create a project where we're improving the reading for the entire school. And seeing that gives me hope to see schools transform. And right now I'm working with Teach for India as a program manager, where I support at least 20 fellows, walking to each of their classrooms and each of their schools, speaking to each of their HMs, and when their headmasters and principals tell me, how are you doing observations? What is the fellow doing differently in their class? Can you share that with me? I can genuinely see schools beginning to transform. And when I talk about transforming country, we recently had on Saturday a teacher training workshop with MCGM teachers who are in our schools. There were 180 teachers supposed to come, 168 teachers turned up, and they were all so enthusiastic and so excited to learn new strategies. They've probably been working, some for 1 year, some for 15, 20 years in the system. Yet all of them still had that enthusiasm of learning something new from us who are just graduates, have a year or 2 of experience, and seeing that ability of us, partnership, and having like 180 teachers, so many HMs, and I don't know how many kids, and building that, I can really see, I don't know about the country, but I can really see our municipal schools that we're working with also transform.
Thanks, Veena. So I'm just going to end with one minute story, because I talked, I think, a lot about the complexity of impact, but I also think, to contradict myself, impact can be very simple as well. So this is a fellow of ours, Srini, who teaches in Dharavi in a municipal school. And in his first week of teaching, he had a 6-year-old boy called Samir in his class. And Samir, because of the school timings, was shifted to another shift. And so Samir went home and told his mother, I'm not going back to school until you put me in Srini Bhaiya's classroom. So the mother was a little taken aback. So the kid actually refused. So the mother said, okay, I'll go and meet the principal, which is a very big thing because our families are very nervous to meet the principal. Went on 3 consecutive days because the principal wouldn't meet her, but her kid was refusing to go back to school. When she finally got into the principal's office, the little boy told the principal, I want to be in Srini Bhaiya's class because Srini Bhaiya doesn't hit me. Srini Bhaiya smiles a lot. Srini Bhaiya sings and dances in class. Srini Bhaiya says if I work hard, my English will be better than his. And Srini Bhaiya says I can become who I want to become. In 1 week, that little 6-year-old boy was able to articulate those 5 reasons why he wanted to be in the class. So I think there's just tremendous scope for impact at multiple levels, from the smallest, most simple impact to the most complex. Thank you.